Welcome back, guys, to the Obstacle Dominator Podcast. And what we're going to be talking about today is running. And a common thing that I hear from people is that they don't enjoy running. So what we're going to talk about is how you can slow the fuck down and optimize your results and performance. Now, there's many reasons why we don't enjoy running. And that really comes from a few different reasons. And likely there is going to be more than what I talk about, but these are the common ones that I come up against and hear people say a lot of. And really, like, I used to fall into the camp of not enjoying running. And it makes perfect sense why I didn't actually enjoy running for the most part. And that was because I was doing it wrong. And actually, there's nothing more natural than walking and running and being in nature. But actually, we don't do it correctly. And we think that we need to do it a specific way, i.e., too hard, too intense, too long, too often. And actually that deters us from the results and the success that we want to get, and ultimately takes away from the enjoyment. And a little bit about my background and story. I've always been pretty active as a kid, climbing trees, being out in nature, done a little bit of sport, played a little bit of football as a kid, but never really got into any structured form of running. And when I was a teenager, joined the military, and running is very different in the military to what it is in the fitness world and in this space in particular now. And every time we went out the door and got our trainers on, it would be some form of high intensity run. They used to call it the 5 mile steady state. We're just going to go for a 5 mile steady state run. It was never steady state. It would be balls to the wall for an hour plus sometimes, and it would be a massive cock off, lots of ego involved, and actually it would not really be enjoyable and therefore beneficial. And as you can imagine, lots of people got injured, lots of people didn't increase their fitness, and it just wasn't a pleasant experience. And I see a lot of people do this in the military, but also outside of military training as well, people that are focusing on wanting to improve their running. And really where it goes wrong is, like I said, every time you get your shoes on, head out the door, you think you've got to try and set a PB. But in actual fact, that's not what we should be doing. There's actually a lot more to it, and we should be a lot more strategic, and we should actually apply principles of training, like how frequent we're doing it, what sort of intensities are we doing those runs and why, and having an understanding of the energy systems and the zones that we should operate in. Yeah. Another thing is how much time should we spend in each of those zones? How much time should we spend in each training session? Yeah. And then also, what is the type of activity? And really the type is the type of training. But first and foremost, before we ask any of those questions and look at any of those principles of fitness, is what is the goal? What is the desired outcome? Now, if you're someone that's new to OCR, maybe it's just to complete your first 5K or 3K, yeah, or to consistently run a Spartan race. Yeah, if you're at the top end of performance, actually maybe you're looking for more marginal gains, yeah, or you want to improve your fitness significantly, but you're unsure of what that is precisely. But regardless of where you are, really it comes down to the right approach, taking action, so the application of that particular approach, and then being consistent with it over the long term. Now, if you're somebody that's just coming into the sport, your gains are going to be significant within the first few weeks, first few months, especially if you've been untrained. But if you're somebody that's been in the game for a long while, you're a competitive heat racer, then actually you're going to need to put a lot more work in and be a lot more consistent to see the improvements. And that doesn't mean that you're putting in more hours and you're training harder at higher intensities, because that's not always the thing that needs to be done, and it certainly shouldn't be done if you're trying to boost your fitness, because actually it just takes longer. So it's understanding how long it actually takes for you to boost your fitness to get the gains that you want. But we need to understand, what is the goal? Why is the goal? And what events, what distances, how many obstacles, what are they? Is it more technical OCR? Is it more Spartan based, where there's a lot more running and less technical obstacles? So there's lots of questions that come out of this. But fundamentally, the most important thing is like the running. And if we can find enjoyment through these steps that I'm going to talk about, then we're going to be more consistent, and therefore we're going to get the results that we want. Okay. So here's 3 to 4 reasons why most of us don't enjoy running. And the first one is it comes down to it hurts. Like either we weigh too much, like the pounds have piled on over the years, and we're getting joint soreness. Yeah, we've got muscle soreness. Maybe there's been a niggle or an injury that's not been addressed or even caused by running as well. Yeah, and this can happen from people to newcomers to elite level athletes. And yet again, this comes down to the education, but also the application and trust in the process. And this is really where it comes into like step number 2, doing too much, too soon, too frequently, at the wrong intensity, and trying to gain too much ground too fast. Here's the thing, like there's only a certain amount of ground we can gain with our fitness in a small amount of time, whether that's 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 6 months, a year. Like there's only so far that we can progress with our fitness. And even if we're doing everything right, it doesn't mean that it's going to boost it anymore. Really, the determining factors are you untrained or are you trained? How long have you been training for? What recent success have you had? What's going on? So there's lots of variables here, but really we want to look at what we're doing, the approach that we're taking. And really, like if we're taking an unsustainable approach, like we're running 6 or 7 days a week and the majority of them are too hard, then you've got to ask yourself, like, how much longevity are we going to have in that? Not just physically, we're talking about like pain and niggles and injuries. Like, how is that going to weigh on you mentally? Like, do you have like the time in the calendar? Yeah, is that workable around life, work commitments, family commitments? Is it too much of a commitment? And therefore you're biting off more than you can chew. And then eventually that would lead to burnout and inconsistency. And then that's when we don't get the results that we want. So it's setting conditions now as you mean to go on. And the approach needs to allow you to continuously progress. And that doesn't necessarily always seeing improvements. That comes down to how consistent can I be? Like, have I got the enjoyment for it? Like, am I dreading going out and going for my run because of what's on the training plan or the calendar or whatever you've conjured up yourself? Or are you actually excited to go out and do that training session? Yeah. And there's other factors like the intensity of that, what you've actually programmed in. Is it too much? Is it too little? Is it optimal? And that's really where we want to operate. Like, we want to make sure that we're applying the bare minimum for maximum results versus how can I max out my results by going maximum all the time. This is a massive thing that's overlooked. Now, we have different energy systems within the body, and each zone will act on and hit that precise energy zone and target the energy system. Okay, so when we're looking at like our easy training, that is building our endurance, that is building our aerobic base and helping us support everything aerobically. So like fat metabolism, utilization of oxygen is the base, it's the bottom of the pyramid from which everything is built upon. But typically this is overlooked, and we operate more in like this gray area of zone 3, which we'll say on Garmin that's the aerobic area. For the most part, that's probably too much for people to be targeting too frequently. And really the upper end of that is acting on the threshold, as well as zone 4, the lactate threshold. And then you've got zone 5, which is maximum output. Now, if we look at each of those, like your zone 1s, your zone 2s, we can operate in this area for a long period of time. Yeah, we could technically go all day, whether it's walking or some other form of cardio activity or even running. Like, it should be at such a light intensity that we could go all day. But here's the problem. A lot of people think, well, how does the light work and how does the easy work translate over to me getting faster? Well, it does over the long term. Like, I've worked with coaches that have been world champion triathletes, I've worked with people that have been elite racers, podium winners, and also like I've yielded results for myself and many, many other people now by applying the easy work. Yeah, and it's not the thing that you're going to wake up tomorrow and click your fingers and you've boosted your fitness significantly, but actually it's something that you can do frequently and sustain it and yield great results over the long term. So this isn't the thing that's going to be boosting your fitness overnight. This is the thing that's going to continuously build that engine behind the scenes forevermore. And the good thing about this is you can build volume, right? So how much you can actually fit in the week. So you can increase the time on the feet, the amount of mileage that you're doing, but in an easy way where it's not coming at a significant cost to your body because it's not hard hitting. Yeah, you can go slow, you can build the base, you can gain time on the feet, increase the mileage, and you can continuously do that because it isn't hard hitting for you. Whereas if you're looking at like zone 5 or zone 4, like they're more intense. Yeah, if you're going out and doing more zone 5 or zone 4 stuff every day, that is going to come at a cost. It's going to come at the cost that it's going to beat your body up in the short term. Yeah, you may be able to sustain it for a few weeks, a few months, but it won't be too long until we start getting like Achilles issues, tendonitis, plantar fasciitis is a very common one that I hear. People with calf strains, people with hip problems, calves that have like had some form of other issue, hamstring issues, yeah, imbalances in the bodies like pain or whatever it is. And really that comes down to doing too much, too soon, too frequently at the wrong intensity. So really the intensity is a huge, huge part of this. But yet again, it goes back to the question of like, why am I doing this run? If you don't know the answer to that, then you should question that. You should go, okay, well, what actually am I trying to achieve? Bigger picture. What am I trying to achieve out of this season goal? What am I trying to achieve in this training block? What am I achieving from this week, this session? What am I preparing for? Yeah, so there's lots of questions that come down to it. And it isn't a case of just literally going out the door and running. Clearly, if you're new, you're going to see results. But if you've been doing this a while, just heading out the door willy-nilly isn't going to be the thing that's going to yield the best results. We need to be more informed. We need to have an understanding of like training structure, energy systems, time spent in each zone, and for what reason. I'm sure there's lots of questions that may come out for this, and like beneath this podcast, actually, it'll be open for Q&A. So I expect you to like ask questions specific to you and where you're at. It's quite good to have some interaction after giving you some food for thought. Okay, so like if running is hurting, yeah, we wanna look at what we can do about that, because if you're not enjoying it because you are in pain, but you do enjoy to run, then you need to take a look at actually how you're running and what you're doing. And I mean, you could look at like the biomechanics. I mean, you could look at your gait, you could look at your running. I mean, you can go to people and have that assessed, which is beneficial. But could it be, yet again, coming down to something as simple as you're going too hard too often, or actually you weigh a little bit too much? Right? I know that's a pretty direct thing, but a lot of guys, a lot of girls are carrying in an excess few pounds, and for every pound of body weight, depending on how fast you're running, like i.e. at the walk, there's 3 pounds of pressure per pound of body weight through the joints. Moving at a moderate pace, that goes to 6 pounds. Moving a bit faster, that's 9 pounds, 12 pounds, and about 16 pounds of pressure as that goes on. So that's a significant increase in pressure. So if your joints are hurting or you're getting muscular injuries, then are you actually sitting at a low body fat percentage? Or are you carrying a little bit of excess body fat that you don't necessarily need? And really, this will come down to optimizing the training intensities, yeah, so that your metabolism is operating efficiently. But that's not really going to work if you're trying to out-train a bad diet or bad nutritional approach, because each macronutrient acts in a different way in the body. Yeah, carbohydrates burn sugar. Okay, that's your carbohydrate metabolism. And then fats and protein is going to promote more of a fat burning metabolism. So if you're slamming loads of carbohydrates all of the time, well, inputs equal outputs. If you're putting too many carbohydrates in your body when you don't necessarily need them, then the excess of that's not stored in your muscles is going to go over to body fat. Yeah, and for the most part, we don't want to lose weight. We want to reduce our body fat percentage. This comes down to two things: optimizing the training intensity, and then also optimizing your nutrition that's specific to you. And these are things that we work on with our guys when they first come in, and it's a real eye opener. Yeah, having a look at how much they are consuming and how much work they are doing to yield results. And like I said, like when I transitioned out of the military and started doing Spartan OCR, I used to absolutely hammer myself. You've probably seen the pictures of me online. Yeah, before I actually got in decent shape. I worked for the best part of a decade to get into shape. And I was doing all sorts of soul crushing workouts. Like being in the military, it's a normal thing to obliterate yourself. It's like, how much can I take physically and mentally and keep going? And I'm doing insane workouts like run a mile as hard as you can, do 30 burpees, and repeat this 10 times. So you got like a good 2-hour workout there of just absolutely annihilating yourself. What's the point? Yeah, what was the goal from that? Yeah, it might get me fitter or make me more mentally resilient, but by doing stuff like that frequently without actually having an understanding of what the aim is, it beats you up, and that can be a deterrent. And that's the thing that makes us avoid doing the work, and we don't find enjoyment, and therefore there's lack of consistency with it. And when that happens, then we don't get the results that we want. Okay, so what I'm saying here is often the way that we view things is very different to how we should be viewing things. Yeah, and actually we live in a very great age where we can gain information relatively easy. Either go online, which can be a bit of a rabbit hole and misleading and take us down the wrong path, and I fell into that trap, and that's actually why I became overweight. Or you can take the other approach and actually find what works for you specifically, and hiring a coach and following a program, someone that can guide you through those logical steps and sequences to find what works and what doesn't. It's not a case blueprint. Follow all these steps perfectly and you will get the results that you want, because that's not the way it works. Like, I'm very different to you, and we're both very different to the next person. So what works for me won't necessarily work for you. So it's about finding what works through a series of processes and eliminating what doesn't work, to what actually works specifically for you. Okay. So let's go into finding more enjoyment for this then. So if you're not enjoying what you're doing, have a look at your environment. Yeah, where are you running? Are you running on the roads? Is that all you've got available to you, or could you go a little bit further afield, or is there some trails you can hit? And then when we're talking about being specific with our training and our goals, if you think about it in OCR, how often are you running on a hard standing? Minimal amount of time. So we want to look at replicating the environment as close as possible. Yeah, and then also looking at footwear as well for that. And this is another thing when I speak to people and they're in pain. It's like, well, when do you last change your shoes and your footwear? Yeah, and I'm like, oh, probably had my shoes 2 years, or I've had them 18 months or whatever. They're probably well past what you should be using them for, and then that can increase risk of injuries, and you're going to take more impact as well. So that's another consideration, and really looking to change your footwear anywhere from 400 to 600 kilometers, or maybe tops 800 kilometers. I'd probably say you'd probably need to change them out quicker if you're wearing trail shoes on the roads. But yet again, that's another consideration. So where are you running? Can you swap out running on the road for trails? Can you run somewhere that's more hilly, in the mountains, a little bit more scenic? Because that's what I find with a lot of people. They run the same routes, or the routes are boring, and they're like, oh, I'll wait a little bit longer, and end up procrastinating. Okay. Another consideration is the weather at this time of year. At the moment, it's quite windy, quite wet, and pretty flat where I'm living. It's not that appealing to go out and run in that condition in this environment, and yet again, that's a deterrent. So could you, I don't know, hop on the treadmill and put a little incline on that and put something on YouTube or conquer a box set. Like anything to allow you to be consistent with your training is going to be better than going, well, I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes around and you make the same excuses. So environment really is key to set us up for success, not only with running, but also in other aspects of life as well. Another one, like, and this piggybacks off the back of environment, it's like, who are you running with? Like, are you running alone every single day, as well as running the same routes? Are you part of a group? Are you part of a community? Like something we do is we do retreats and camps, and we've actually got two coming up soon where we will run together. All right, and we'll run in nature, really, really scenic places, and have a laugh and have some fun. And yet again, that's another thing that goes back onto the training and the intensities is, well, if you're so like rigid and structured and you've got to follow the training session to the T without actually looking up and taking in the environment, like you've got to ask yourself, why are you actually doing this? Like, no wonder you don't find enjoyment for what you're doing if you're just looking at it as this training session that you've got to tick off. Like, that's not the way to live. I've definitely fallen into the trap myself. So like, find some enjoyment. If you're going somewhere scenic, look up, look at the environment, like, have a laugh with the people that you're with, because there's a lot to be gained from that experience and also the people that you're running with. So like, find a group, find a community, run with people. I'm constantly like vocalizing where I'm going in training, and people want to tag along, come tag along, be good fun. Okay, so like I mentioned, there's a few sort of points on why people don't lack, or sorry, they lack the enjoyment for running. The question is like, what can we do about this? And I'm sure it's drawn out some questions. So use the question box below to ask any questions specific to what I've said, and I'll come back into this and actually look at what we can do about this for you. All right, and I'll give you some suggestions, but there's a few things I've written down that will be really beneficial for you. All right, so you can find some enjoyment. So the first one is like understanding that you don't need to go and annihilate yourself every time you run out the door. In fact, it's going to be counterproductive. So you need to understand the energy systems, the zones, and ultimately the goal of that training session or that training block, and really what you're looking to achieve out of doing that session. If you don't really know what you're looking to develop, then you're kind of stabbing in the dark a little bit, and really that should be avoidable by planning what you're going to do. So planning your season, planning your runs. Do I necessarily need to be running at this time of the year, like this far out of the competitive season? Do I need to be running? Like, what am I trying to achieve? Yeah. And if I'm trying to build a base, then could I do some form of cross training to keep off the impact? Maybe you are doing too much like running, and maybe you could benefit from swapping out for some rowing, some cycling, or some other form of cardio activity. Okay, so actually plan your runs, plan the routes. Okay, so choose new routes that you can go on. Yeah, when I first moved to this place, I absolutely loved like running on the trails because I was exploring and going to new places. And a really funny thing, actually, about 6 weeks ago, I've been running past this massive like wood block and fen, not knowing that actually it's got loads of decent trails in it. I was just like sticking to the road that went beside it so I could get back onto the fields, and it's typically doing the same route. And clearly there's benefit to that, because if you're running the same route at the same intensity each and every week, you can see progress in the way that you feel and through the stats. But I'm talking about like reinvigorating things. Otherwise it's like, oh, I don't really want to run that route again. The weather's miserable. And we make all these excuses up to ourselves, when actually like that's all avoidable by going and running a different route, either reversing that route or taking an extra loop. And I found this fen basically and ran on new trails. And I was like, oh, I've actually been here before, but I was over the other side of it. So I was like, oh, I'll run around there and explore that while I was doing my interval session, and went across some new routes and ended up jumping over some gates and going across some fences and some bridges and exploring. And it made it a really enjoyable experience because I was doing something new. And sometimes we need variety to kick in the consistency. So my question is now is like, how can you like choose new routes? How can you explore new routes to reignite and reinvigorate these things? Now, clearly, like it doesn't matter. You could run the same route every single day and you'll get the results. But what we're talking about is like the compliance. And the more compliant we are to the training program, then the more consistent we're going to be. And then the better results we're going to get. Now, second one, in terms of like what we can do is slow down. Okay. If you're new to this, you're going to want to start small. Something I frequently hear from people is, Matt, I want to get faster. But if we like sit and ponder that question for a minute, what does that actually mean? Yeah, what does I want to become faster mean? Yeah, we all want to be faster, but do you want to be faster at a sprint distance? So like running 100 meters? Do you want to be like consistent or faster at running like a ninja course? You want to run a 5K, a 10K, 21K, do an ultra? Like what does that actually mean? And for the most part, we're not talking about, I want to be able to sprint faster. Yeah, that'd be nice, but that's not going to really like boost what we do within OCR. Like what we really mean is I want to be able to move at a consistent pace at a high intensity for as long as possible. Yeah, I want to get faster. So I want to get down my kilometer time. Yeah. But then be able to sustain that pace kilometer in, kilometer out for many Ks or whatever race distance we're doing. Yeah. And really what that comes down to, again, is your zone 2. Yeah, because that's allowing you to build the volume and get the mileage up, build the mitochondria, which are the powerhouses in the body, as well as building aerobic efficiency and that engine for endurance. But then also looking at like the higher zones, like the upper end zone 3 and zone 4, where we're building that lactate threshold. Yeah, and that's the stuff where the magic happens. Yeah, but it's understanding you can't do these things every day and you need to have small doses of this. So yeah, again, comes back to education. But if you're just new to this, then start small, build up, see how your body reacts, and then increase in small doses from there. And you don't need to apply progressive overload in terms of like what guys do with strength training. Like every training session, I'm going to add a rep, or every training session, I'm going to add more weight to the bar. That shouldn't always be the case with running. It shouldn't be like, yeah, today I ran 5K, so tomorrow I'm going to run 6K. Like that's a massive percentage increase. And if you do that every single day, that's a hell of a lot of extra distance. Okay. But typically what we do is we run through pain, niggles and injury, and we follow the training program blindly, like I did for many years, thinking I've got to be more consistent with this. These are the reasons why I'm not getting the results that I want with my training, is because I'm not following the program to a T. But in actual fact, I was overtraining. Yeah, I was doing too much of that thing, or I was simply doing the wrong thing for the outcomes that I wanted and not getting the results that I wanted because I wasn't rested enough. I wasn't recovered enough. Yeah, I wasn't aligning with a healthy lifestyle. And that's what we stand for here at Primal. Like the Primal philosophy is, well, look after yourself, apply self-care. Yeah. We need to make sure that our human body is in a good place. Our hormones are optimized and functioning in the correct way. Yeah, we're putting the right inputs in, i.e., are we getting out in nature? Are we getting plenty of light? Are we hydrating? Are we charging our body with earth, with nutritious food, sleep? Or are we actually drawing our energy down, and that's having a negative impact on us? Okay, so just want you to slow down and reevaluate everything that you're doing here and ask yourself why. And equally, if you're like a top runner, like you're elite level or competitive, yet again, you probably benefit from slowing down more. Like I'm into my off season now, and I've spoken to 4 of my guys today who are now coming into the off season or had about a week off already. And the insights that they've had are phenomenal because they've just slowed the fuck down and they've evaluated the past year, recent competition, and what they want out for the next 12 months. Okay, and really like just giving ourselves that time rather than just stabbing in the dark is a very, very beneficial thing to do. Next one is tracking progress or tracking training. There's a great saying, what we track will improve. What we track will improve. Okay, so are you writing down what you're doing? Yeah, are you keeping a journal? Are you using an app like we use? Yeah, to literally track every little detail, not only track all the details of pacing and like how many reps or how many intervals or whatever you've done, actually leaving training notes on that session. How did I feel mentally on a score of 1 to 10? Yeah. How did I feel physically? Did my body feel fresh? Did I respond? Did I stick to the training intensities? Did I need to back off a little bit because of whatever condition? Or could I actually like up the ante a little bit because I felt really strong because I've nailed all the rest of my training? And there's a really great analogy that I talk about with my guys. And I want you to imagine like two athletes. Okay, so athlete one is the guy that hits it hard 4 days a week. Okay, so they absolutely annihilate themselves on 4 days a week. Okay, athlete two is somebody that trains optimally. Okay, so they train pretty much every single day, like 7 days a week. Yeah, but they don't absolutely hammer themselves. They get up, they do 1 to 2 training sessions a day. They stick to the heart rate zones, the energy systems that they're training for both running and strength training, and they wake up and do exactly the same the next day. They move through that week, they're not sore, they're primed, they're fresh, they feel really good. Versus athlete one that wakes up and trains 1 to 2 times a day, 3 to 4 days a week, and absolutely obliterates themselves, or maybe they even train more days. Yeah. Imagine now, athlete one, how you feel at the end of that week. How does your body feel? Like, are you sore? Are you fatigued? Are you frequently hungry? Are you that person that's carrying a little bit of excess body fat as well? And the harder you train, the harder you fall, and you're not really seeing the results that you want. I was this guy. I'd wake up on a Friday morning, I have to peel myself out of bed. I have to motivate myself to go and do the training session. Yeah, and I was constantly on the edge of burnout and burning out. And that's when it changed for me, and I pivoted and got educated. And that's really where the magic happened. But really going back into athlete one, who's overtraining and really sore, or athlete two, who's optimizing his training intensity. At the end of the year, who's going to be bigger, better, stronger? The guy that's broken himself down, or the guy that's optimized his training intensities? Yeah. So there's no point in making like massive adjustments, going at massive intensity. There's times specifically for that, like if you're going to be a few weeks out from competition, maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever, if you want to ramp things up and specifically condition yourself. But we're in this for the long haul. So the important thing is that we set conditions for how we mean to go on, so that we have longevity within the sport, rather than burning ourselves out before we've really got started. And really, that's the thing that affects the consistency over the long term. So looking at those two groups and those two people in particular, like who's got the most amount of training in the year? Okay, if the guy is training super intense 3 to 4 days a week, maybe multiple times a day, he's getting in anything from like 6 to 12 training sessions. Yeah, whereas the other guy, he's getting in, well, a lot more than that because he's able to train pretty much every day. So at the end of the month, the end of the year, yeah, who's got more training in, but who is also more primed to perform? It's going to be athlete number two. Okay. So really just being in the know of what you're doing while you're doing it, and not absolutely hammering yourself and following the training program down to a T where actually it ends up being detrimental. And here's the thing that like beats any training program. All right, and I say this to all my guys. All right, phenomenal training programs. I mean, you see the results that the guys are getting, and that's because they are consistent. They're consistently hitting the numbers. They're consistently tracking, consistently showing up for themselves, and the results come based on that. Okay, so we need to make sure that we are following that plan. But what overrules that are the variables that life throws our way. Yeah, sometimes we get a lousy night's sleep. You may have kids. Yeah, you may be traveling. You may be doing too many races, which adds to inconsistencies. And that's the thing that prevents us from performing and training. So we have to be realistic, and we have to be intuitive. We have to be flexible and adaptable to what life throws our way. Okay. And something I recommend for all my guys is moving training around to suit your schedule. I will lay it out in such a way that you have rest and recovery in between big sessions. But what overrules that is the athlete and how they feel. All right. And if they move things around and that works, great. If it doesn't work and they move things around and things slip off the calendar, so be it. That's the nature of the beast. That's how it rolls. Okay. And we have to not see that as a negative. We have to see that as a win, because what we had done in the previous day's training actually was effective, but maybe there might have been some form of overreaching, which, yet again, going back to athlete one, too much, too soon, too frequently, the wrong intensity led to inconsistencies down the line. But all of this information is feedback from the environment, from the training, which allows us to recalibrate and continue to get better. Okay, so we don't know any of this if we don't track our training. So that's what I'm saying. We need to track. What we track will improve because we've got the metrics and data. And speaking to some of my guys today, well, I said they couldn't imagine that they would have been like finishing where they are in the trifecta world championships with like top 10s, top 20s, top 30s. All right, people like knocking on the door of podiums at like European and national level. 12 months ago, they couldn't imagine that stuff. Yeah, but now through the consistency, through the action that they've taken, the needle's moving, they're progressing. And that's another big thing as well, like comparison. Like, don't compare yourself to someone else. Yeah, it's good to have that and say, oh, this person's doing this and whatever else. That's nice. And it can be good to be competitive in that way, but we don't want to do it to the point where it's actually detrimental for us. Okay, it's you versus you, and providing you're progressing through what you're doing and you're tracking that, so that actually you can see those results. That's the main thing. Okay. And when we don't do that, we try and force change. We try and like level up to someone that's probably got 10 years more experience than us. And then we beat ourselves up when we fail or whatever else, when we're not looking at all the factors that are involved. Okay. And then like another thing is, I know I've touched on this a couple of times, but get educated, like get a coach to write your plan, guide you through it, hold you accountable, educate you some more so that you can come out the other side bigger, better, and stronger. Okay, team. That's all I'm going to mention on this. But yeah, like if you're somebody that's finding you're lacking enjoyment with running, I'll be upfront. You're doing it wrong. Like I said, I fell into that camp, but actually now I consider myself to become a runner. And in most cases, I prefer to run than go and strength train or do something else. And that's because I found enjoyment by optimizing the intensities, the environment, and who I surround myself with, and also the plan that I follow and the results that I'm yielding from that. And you can do exactly the same. I hope you took some value. Please ask some questions. I look forward to your feedback, and I hope you took some value from this podcast. Catch you soon, guys, and I'll speak soon. Bye.